Redditors, how far have you gone in a truth or dare game? Story 1. Not me, but my neighbor's fiancé. I lived in an apartment complex and we had some friends over. It also invited the new neighbors, med school grad and his fiancé, and seemed pretty tame overall. It was a pretty equal mix of 4 guys and 4 girls. The girls were all sitting at the kitchen table, and the guys were back and forth between the den and the patio to smoke. Hours went by and we were all pretty drunk. The guys had started taking shots and playing truth or dare. All the guys were out back and had come in to get another beer and use the restroom. While I was coming out of the bathroom, I heard the seemingly tame fiancé say, "Truth," and one of the girls asked, "Have you ever had an encounter in exchange for something?" I felt embarrassed at first because I thought my perverted friends were corrupting this innocent young woman. She was probably 22 or 23, but I thought, I gotta hear this. So I walked back to the fridge. The girl looked back and made sure her fiancé wasn't inside, and she said, "Back in college, I asked a cute stranger at the liquor store to buy me some beer, and he said only if I blew him, so I did." We weren't expecting that level of truth. Story 2. My best friend and I used to play this all the time, but he would always find ways to get out of meeting his dare. For example, I dared him to run around the block naked, so he took a toy block into the bathroom, stripped and ran around it. Things like that. One night I got tired of it, so I dared him to run down the end of the street naked and actually do his dares for once. He agreed, but only in one condition: that I accept his dare to stand in the front lawn naked. We agreed, so we both grabbed towels, stripped down, and went outside. On the count of 3, we both dropped our towels. He ran down the street, and I stood there looking around like a very skinny, pale idiot. After about 25 seconds, I heard what sounded like a yell. The next thing I knew, he was running back as fast as he could, screaming that I needed to get inside and fast. It turns out that as soon as he reached the corner, the cop car had driven past. Needless to say, we didn't venture out for a while, and the game was over. Story 3. My friend dared me to put Icy Hot on my dong. At the time, I didn't know what Icy Hot was, so obviously I had no idea what was going to happen to my tackle. It was in the middle of the winter in Montana, and the end result was me running outside and stuffing the entirety of my genitalia into a snowdrift. That actually made it worse. I was pretty much done with truth or dare after that. Story 4. A group of us were playing a low-key game of truth or dare. Eventually, some people left. Another started playing games and a console. That left me and another guy sitting on the bed watching, with our lower bodies under the quilt. He dared me to grab his dong, and I did. So, yeah, 8 years later we're both gay. Story 5. After a late-night movie run, some friends and I decided to play Truth or Dare at the deserted mall. We were on the second level above a play-place daycare for younger children. They dared me to jump into the ball pit, and I thought it would be fine because the jump was no more than 15 feet, and I'd be cushioned for my fall. However, they removed the balls every night, and I ended up with the ugliest bruise on my ass for weeks. Another time I went skinny dipping in a house that was supposedly still for sale. Somebody had already moved in, and he was a pastor. Fun. Story 6. On the ride back home on a CTA train, I was with about 10 other people. One guy ate a spider web. One girl drank a Coke out of a trash can. I had to pour 5 water bottles down my pants. Another girl had to put my sock in her mouth. One guy had to strip naked, but only for a short time. Another girl had to do the worm across our entire section of the train. One guy had to put his entire body inside a trash can for 5 minutes. Another girl, while walking back, had to lick a street puddle. One guy had to pole dance for 5 minutes on the train ride. Finally, one girl had to lick the train. Looking back, I think it got the easiest and safest fare. Story 7. At a party, I was dared to straddle some guy while he was lying down and lick melted chocolate off his face and neck until it was clean. It wasn't too bad, but now he's my best friend's boyfriend, and it's pretty awkward. Story 8. Playing in detention in high school, there were old CRT monitors sitting on a table in the back of the room. I was dared to get up and carry one to the desk I was sitting at, and when asked what I was doing, I replied, "I need to check my email." I was probably informed that a computer won't work and told to put it back and sit down. It was a good detention. Story 9. When I was around 8th grade, My friends and I used to play Truth or Dare with my sister and her friends, who were just a grade below us. We'd play Strip, Truth or Dare, meaning if you didn't do a dare, you had to shed layers. This would lead to some pretty hardcore dares that were actually performed by the end of the night. This one girl, I had a crush on her at the time, definitely took the cake in the most outrageous dare. She was stripped to just underwear, and any dare she didn't do meant permanent nudity for the rest of the night. Naturally, me and my buddy dared her to stick a ping-pong paddle up her. Needless to say, we never used that paddle after that. Story 10. When I was in college, a whole bunch of my friends and I rented a cottage for the weekend. We decided, after playing a few drinking games, to play Truth or Dare. The dares were pretty lame, and I decided it was time to kick it up a notch. I began dishing out dares like two girls make out. Girls get into bikinis and hop into the hot tub that was busted, so the water was ice cold and pulling crazy truths out of people. Eventually, it was my turn to be there, and to be a good sport, I chose Dare. The revenge was, you get a makeover with eyeliner, blush, lipstick, and earrings, and you must go home with this on you to your overprotective girlfriend like that. Needless to say, it was an awkward drive home from that weekend. Story 11. A few highlights leading up to the main event, inserting a tampon in my, staring at a friend in the eyes while doing it, not to completion. The dare was only to get an erection, in by punishing the person who formulated the dare seem fair. Defecating in a bucket and leaving it in the common room of a different floor in the dorm. Things were rapidly progressing in one game of Truth or Dare. As usual, the entire group was naked rather quickly. We had a rule that you could refuse a dare if you deemed it outside of your comfort zone, but it cost you one article of clothing. Such a rule is ripe for abuse, and it was subsequently abused. Absurd dares were regularly formulated for the sole purpose of clothing removal. So back to the story. In the midst of this naked group, a girl is dared to make out with me, while I found her neither physically or mentally attractive. I oblige as part of the game. I've also been sporting an erection for a while now due to other, more attractive individuals involved. She takes this as a cue to initiate hooking up, fortunately with a sense to have brought a condom out of her bag as well. Despite my obvious lack of inhibitions regarding nudity, I was still quite socially awkward during my freshman year of college, and nothing I had experienced to truly prepared me to publicly reject such a direct offer of sleeping with. It just seemed downright rude and mean. In private, I likely would have managed that in front of a crowd. That was one way to crush a girl's ego. So I let it happen. This effectively ends the game of Truth or Dare, as we instead become the main spectacle. Other people begin putting on clothes. Thank God they decided not to join in. In an attempt to detach myself emotionally from the situation, I moved to the other position so that I can carry on having a political discussion that had been started earlier, while pretending that nothing was happening. I was very passionate about hating George W. Bush. She decided she wants another position which makes this much more difficult. She then drops a bomb. She pushes my head back, stares me in the eyes and says, "You have no idea how long I've wanted you. At this precise moment, I feel something go awry down below and check, the condom broke." Despite everything else that happened, I'm granted this one saving grace. No one has a spare, and everything else has to end prematurely. I'm still drinking with my friends, and she decided to go back to her room, though nothing about her movements suggests the walk of shame. Story 12. In high school, I got dared to make myself pass out during class. I can make myself pass out, but only really done it once before this time on accident. And then once I woke up, I tried to remember to scream out, "Not this again," and run out of the room. All they had to do was tell the sub that I fainted and try to get a crowd around me. Unfortunately, these friends hadn't seen anyone pass out before, so they thought I died. So then they started freaking out. That got the sub scared, so she called the principal. When I woke up, I had no idea where I was. But thankfully, I remember the first time I passed out and told the principal, "Oh damn it, it happened again." And that was escorted out of the room to the nurse's office, and parents called, yada yada yada. And the next day I won the respect of the kids in those class once they found out it was planned. The kids that dared me gave me like $5 each. Story 13. I was sitting with my girlfriend next to me and received the dare, kiss the person next to you. I made eye contact with her, smiled and leaned in. As soon as I saw her close her eyes, I whipped around to my right, grabbed my friend's jaw, and kissed him square in the lips. Oh, she was mad, but was it worth it? Story 14. Got dared to kiss my back then high school crush. Couldn't do it not because I'm kind of shy, but because it was my crush, so I denied it and got booed out. She later came to check up on me and asked if I want to do it now that the others weren't around. Of course I said yes, and we kissed, first on the cheek, then normally. Afterwards she giggled and told me she liked it. There never came anything from it, but I still think of her quite a lot these days. Story 15. Rather tame compared to some of the stuff that I've seen, and may or may not be envious of. The one time when I was like 13 or 14, playing Truth or Dare at a sleepover, I was dared to walk into my friend's sister's room. There were 17 and 19, without knocking, and just shout boobs. The only condition I set forth was that I was allowed to board back to his room and lock the door so they couldn't beat me up. I did it, and all I saw were the confused faces of the sisters, who had already gone to sleep, staring at my scrawny, shirtless, pubescent face, yelling boobs at 2 a.m. disappointing and anticlimactic as well. But that's what happens when you don't have friends. Story 16. Asks Susan, not her real name, out on stage tomorrow during assembly. You won't. Susan, by the way, was my crush through high school. She was top of our class and one of the fastest swimmers in our team, which I was also part of myself, and hella gorgeous. Basically, ask all your crushes, every single high school dude's dream girl. I did. In front of the whole school. It was embarrassing as hell. She walked off stage. Half the audience laughed at me for my stupidity, and I was crushed. But as a man of my word, I had to follow the dare, which my friends didn't expect me to actually do. The rest of the day, I received a mix of jeers at my expense and pity at my rejection, and I just felt defeated, knowing full well what I'd just done over a stupid dare. But after school, while I was still reeling, she met me, and to my great surprise, she accepted. We dated for 2 years before we had to split for college. Story 17. In 8th grade, my girlfriend invited my friend and I to a party of about 8 people. We were the only dudes. I started playing strip poker, and my buddy rigged the deck so that we won and got to see our first set of boobs from the 2 best-looking girls there. We played some Spin the Bottle, 7 Minutes in Heaven, and of course, Truth or Dare. The worst part of the story was the following week, when some of the girls at the party were invited to a weekend school retreat with a couple of teachers. They began to tell the teachers some of the things that happened at the party. My mom was one of the teachers. Game over. Story 18. One for me, I dared to jump off a bridge that was about 30 or 40 feet above water that was at most 5 or 6 feet deep. Did so and came out unscathed. My 17-year-old son, mind you, and his mother don't know yet. I guess I dared to hook up with some chick that was about 25 years old. He did, and that's how he lost his virginity. I talked to the girl and she said, yes, it did happen. She was drunk and whatnot, and it was all consensual. Story 19. I was playing with a very small group of friends, including my crush and her sister at my house. The sister went for some water and came back with a nice cup. She tripped, and the water drenched my little crush. Nothing was poking out. Her shirt was just wet. She then went to the bathroom to change into her little vest and nothing else while her clothes dried out. When the time came, she had to put her clothes back on and headed to the bathroom again. However, she forgot her now dry clothes and asked me to hand them to her. When I went to the bathroom, she was completely topless and didn't seem to care much. While this wasn't a dare, it happened during Truth or Dare, so I guess it counts. Anyway, I later learned she also had a crush on me, and that's probably why she did it. We later became a couple, which lasted for about a month. Cool times, story 20. The Truth or Dare comes in at the end, but the context is what really makes the story in my mind. It was my 18th birthday. I was the baby of my class with a summer birthday, so my 18th was right in the midst of graduation party season. Everyone was excited about college and trying to soak up as much time as they could with friends before moving away that fall. I was also just out of a toxic long-term relationship that I had stayed in for most of high school. My ex-girlfriend was jealous and controlling. She was my first girlfriend, and I had no context for what a healthy relationship was, so we didn't break up until shortly before I graduated. Over the past 2 years, I had let her slowly pull me away from my friends. Eventually, I hardly spent any time with them outside of school. Not to mention I was a bit of a wallflower, and definitely an introvert to begin with. I was known as a pretty chill guy, and was either liked or at least respected by multiple social groups in my school, but had very few close friends. However, things began to look up. My mom worked the front desk at a luxury waterfront hotel in town and set me up in the biggest suite in the whole damn place for the night. She and my dad cooked a bunch of food for the party, bought me an ice cream cake, told me not to drink alcohol or trash the place, and left for the rest of the night. One positive side effect of being a studious goody-two-shoes during high school is that your parents apparently trust you. But still, when I invited all my friends to my 18th, I expected to have fun and for there to be a decent turnout, but that it would ultimately be a modest and forgettable party for a modest and forgettable guy. Instead, absolutely everyone showed up. Not everyone could stay long, but everyone came by to celebrate. We hung out in the pool, chatted, and generally had a great time. And a huge communal birthday card made from poster paper folded in half with the theme, "Now that you're 18, you can enjoy." Taped to the center of the card was a Playboy centerfold with the word porn written under it. There was also a box of cigarettes, a cigar, a pack of condoms, a military application, a voting ballot, etc. I was almost crying by the time I finished going through it because, besides being hilarious, it was so thoughtful. It was so meaningful to me to realize that my friends cared so much, even after I felt I had neglected those friendships for so long. The party went on, and it was everything I couldn't have wanted for my 18th. But of course, like any gathering of teenagers in good spirits without parental supervision, we eventually got into playing truth or dare, even without the aid of alcohol. The topics naturally all quickly devolved into something related to hooking up or nudity. Now, I was a virgin at this point, and my friends weren't the craziest bunch in school. So by that, I mean leaning out of PG-13 amounts of suggestive, a girl got dared to give a blowjob to a hot dog, a guy got dared to strip and run outside to the outdoor pool and back, etc. The energy in the room had eventually gotten pretty naughty, but it was also getting late, and we had been telling the truth or daring for a couple of hours at this point. Some people had to leave for the night, and we were down to a smaller group of about 10. Of these 10, there were 3 girls, and all 3 were, in my opinion, among the top 5 most attractive girls in my graduating class. So one of my guy friends, who was the craziest of this non-crazy bunch, decides to cap off the game with one final dare. A dare to all 3 girls that would also serve as a final birthday present for me. At this point, you probably have an idea where this is going. That idea is probably wrong. This guy dares all 3 girls to finish the last remaining slice of ice cream cake by eating it off of my stomach without using their hands. The girls giggle and then agree. I take off my shirt and lie back on a huge ottoman. They gather over me, and maybe this is a wishful false memory, but I swear I remember them all saying, "Happy birthday macrophage mage" in unison with flirty voices before going at it. Over the next 5 minutes, my abs, which I thankfully had at that point in my life. Thank you, adolescent metabolism, experienced a symphony of icy, melt cold, and warm, wet tongues, courtesy of 3 of the hottest girls in my class, while also being watched by several of my guy friends. I got several compliments on my abs. To date, I don't think I've ever had a stranger erotic experience in my life. I don't know if I ever will, but it's certainly a fond, bizarre memory. Story 21. Played a game with some kids when I was 10, and they dared me to never go on a date. 13 years later, and I'm still winning.